As we indicated in our last get-together, that we will be talking today about having maximum thermal comfort in a building, including our house, with least expenditure of energy. Naturally, this is based on two principles, that during the cold season, we want to bring in maximum solar heat into the building and want to keep the cold air out, as well as we want to store some heat for the time being when it is cold and when heat is needed much more in the building itself. In the hot weather, it is the opposite, that you want minimum solar heat to enter into the building and you want to keep out the hot air, and you still want a storage of what we call coolness, which means low temperature substance. We will start in the composite climates, like those climates which are which have also lot of heat, lot of hot days and lot of cold days. You want an arrangement so that solar heat can be brought in or kept out, outside air can be brought in or kept out. And then there is a third concept which is very interesting, that through the opaque portions of the building, we build in what is called a phase lag. A phase lag simply means that when it is hottest outside, it will be a few hours after that it becomes hottest inside, which means it takes some time for the heat to travel, and if we can make that time something like 12 hours, supposing the heat when it is noon gets into the building at midnight, then we can cool the building by bringing in outside air. So, a phase lag is also a very important consideration in the design of buildings, which we want to stay thermally comfortable without expenditure of energy. Now, I would like to show you a concept which all of you know, which is called direct gain. By gain, I mean gain of thermal energy from the sun. If you look at the visual, you would find that on the south side, you have a large glazed exterior. It could be a large glass window, which could also serve as a picture window. And on the right side, we do have an opaque wall, and of course, there is the roof and there is the floor. You can ask a question, why do we have this glazing on the south side? Now, this property, why we have this, was known to the oldest civilizations. In fact, Socrates writes that we should build our buildings so that they can bring in the sun through the south side when needed, and this will ensure that during the hot weather it will stay up, which means that the sun does not enter through the south side in the summer, but it enters through the south side in the winter in a very large amount. But this is true of the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, the opposite is true. Now, if you look at a situation like this, and we have a glazing, and then over the glazing we have a removable thermal curtain. During the day when the sun is hot or the sun is on, we remove the thermal curtain so that the solar radiation enters into the room, it heats whatever is in the room and gets fairly trapped, which means that it is not that the energy which it receives is not able to radiate out, but some energy is certainly lost through convection, through the glazing, as well as conduction through the floor, conduction through the walls, conduction through the roof. That is a separate question. In the night, when there is no sun, but only the glazing is on, we will lose a lot of energy because of convection as well as conduction. So we bring in a removable thermal curtain, which could be something like a straw, made of a straw, so that this curtain keeps the heat in to a large extent. This is called direct gain. Now, the biggest disadvantage of direct gain is that you have a lot of thermal swing. What does thermal swing means? Sometimes you have very high temperatures and sometimes you have very low temperatures. To keep the swings, we use what is called a storage, which means when it is hot, we store solar energy in something so that the temperature does not rise much, and when it is cold, then the storage releases heat to keep the room warm. So, the role of a storage is very important in such an operation. The next kind of a thing that I am going to show is what we call an indirect gain. The disadvantage of the direct gain is that it brings in a lot of glare into the building, and the second thing is that the solar radiation falling in the building on furniture or on things like upholstery may fade it away. So that some people do not like direct gain, they like an indirect gain, that we want to bring in the solar energy anyway. For this there have been concepts which are very old, that people used to have thick walls, and this is in all civilizations, that they have a thick wall facing south. What is the advantage of a thick wall? The thick wall absorbs solar energy during the day and releases it during the night to the room. To make it more effective, Trombe, T-R-O-M-B-E, used an ingenious concept. In Pyrenees, which is a mountain range on the border of France and Spain, there were some houses built in which this concept was used. In a typical concept, you can see that, as in the visual, there is a room and there is a thick wall and a glazing in front of it. The other thing you notice is that there are two dampers, one below and one at the top. Let us consider what happens during the day. During the day, the glazing gets solar energy and the solar energy falls on the wall. This solar energy is retained to a large extent because of the glazing, it is not able to go out. So, this solar energy goes inside the room. However, there is a thermal lag, which means it takes some time for this energy to get into the room. And what do I do in the morning? In the morning, I let these two dampers, as shown, up and down, open. What will happen because of that? The air in the room is cold, the air on between the glazing and the wall is hot, because the wall is hot. So, therefore, there is thermal circulation and the air keeps circulating, and the warm or the hot air between the glazing and the wall enters the room and heats it. When the room is heated sufficiently, I close the dampers. And then what happens is that the wall gets more and more heated and it stores some thermal energy and it gives the rest to the room. So, it serves both the purposes of something like a direct gain kind of a thing, that as soon as the sun shines we get something, and as well as a delayed action. And the temperature rise and temperature fall are not very much, so that we say that thermal swings are small. Another concept of indirect gain, which you see in the next visual, is also very much used, and what we have is that we have a Trombe wall, but in front of it we do not have a glazing in the plain form, but we have a curved glazing which could be made of plastic. So, there is some space between the wall and the glazing, and this could be used as a greenhouse, this could be used as a hothouse in the morning, and a comfortable space for a person to be in. Here the principle is the same again. The glazing comes in, it falls on the wall, It operates, then the wall gets hot, and the operation is the same as in the case of the trombe wall. The disadvantage here is that the heat entering the room is not as much as in the case of the trombe wall. The advantage is we are provided with some useful sun space which we can use. So, these are the two concepts. The later concept is called solarium. There is an interesting concept which can be used in summers as well as winters. And if you look at the visual, it tells you the operation of this concept during the roof. The interesting part of this concept called the roof pond is that a visiting scientist to India, Hayes, used it for the first time in India. We have a roof, a black roof, which is fairly conducting, which means between it and the room there is very little thermal resistance, and on this roof we place some bags of water, and the roof is blackened, and we then put in a little water over it so that all the bags are dipped into water. During the summer in the night, what would happen is that it will radiate to the sky, and a lot of radiation will take place. Some heat will be lost by convection, and therefore this will get cooled, and the heat in the inside the room will then be given to this cold water, and therefore the room will stay cooler. During the day, all we do is that we cover this system with an insulated cover, so that the outside heat or the sun does not enter in, and it is cool already, and whatever heat is generated during the day in the room goes into this cold water, and it is ready for operation in the night. During the winters, it operates in a different manner, as you would visualize. In the night, we of course have a transparent cover, so that the heat stored in the water bags is not lost. There is no extra water layer, and during the day we let the water bags be heated by the radiation absorbed by the black roof. Some of the radiation is directly absorbed and goes into the room, so that during the day I build in the storage, during the night I use it. Another concept which is very interesting, and this is used to a good, very good effect, particularly in deserts, is the evaporative cooling concept. Evaporative cooling all of us know, and we have seen desert coolers. Before desert coolers came in, there were khass tattis or khass curtains which were used for this purpose. Here you have a lot of straw which is kept wet, and air is blown through this, so that the air gets cooled. This is a very interesting and nice concept, and one uses it very much in this country. The other question that we do not realize very much is that this direct evaporative cooling is also used to a good extent in our villages. One finds that all these matkas are built of earthenware which are porous. Porous means what? That some of the water from inside keeps on coming out. This water gets evaporated, so that the inside water gets cooled, and after a while you find a matka does not work. Why? Because some of the salts in the water which got evaporated deposit there, so that the channels are blocked and no more water comes from inside to get evaporated, and the effectiveness of the matka is lost as far as our cooling is concerned. Then there is indirect method. One of them is the mechanical method, and one of them again is the passive method. In the passive method, what we do is that we cool the roof. The roof of a building is cooled, and this cools the roof to considerably low temperatures, which is very useful as far as temperatures are concerned, and if the roof is cool, the building loses heat to the roof instead of gaining heat through the roof. In the mechanical system, what we do is that we cool water by means of evaporative cooling, and we pass air through this water through some tubes, and therefore we cool the air. What is the advantage of this indirect cooling? The advantage of indirect cooling is that we cool the air, but we do not increase the humidity, because ultimately our comfort depends upon two things: the temperature of the air as well as the relative humidity in it. There is a third factor which also controls the comfort, and that is the wind speed. And that is why in the summer, when the temperatures are not very high, then a fan helps us a lot to stay cool even at little larger temperatures. There is still another way that we get our help from nature. This is also an indirect method, and the series of these methods are called earth storage. What is meant by earth storage? Earth storage means that the heat falls on the ground when the sun is there, and then heat is lost from the ground when the sun is no longer there. So what happens? During the day, the earth stores heat. During the night, the earth gives away this heat to the atmosphere. You can consider this in two ways. One is the daily process, when you consider day and night, and the other is the yearly process, when you have summers and you have winters. So there are two periods which are involved. One is a year and the other is a day. Then it is seen that about 4 meters below the surface of the earth, the temperature is very comfortable. What does it mean? It is cooler 4 meters below the depth, at the depth of the ground. It is hotter in winters and it is cooler in the summer. So somehow if this heat could be utilized, it would be a very useful thing for us to have. How do you extract heat from anything? There are two ways to do it. One is that you flow water through pipes passing from such a depth, or you flow air through such a thing, or the third thing is you operate what is called a heat pump. All these three systems have been used and can be used to advantage. The third thing is that nobody gave you, God gave you some temperatures for the earth at 4 meters. This temperature could be lower or this temperature could be higher by treating the earth, which means by changing the surface of the earth. If we want to increase the temperature of the surface of the earth, we take a large area, blacken it and glaze it, which means put some kind of a rough things which is black, and then cover it with some kind of a cheap plastic, that is blackening and glazing, and the other is shading and wetting. And the most beautiful process, which is also aesthetic, is grow grass over it and keep the grass wet. This is a very beautiful way of doing things. The third thing, which is another thing which is important, not the third thing, is that in many buildings you see that during the day we use electrical power for lighting. Now this is a waste. By careful designing of the buildings, by using a lot of devices which are now available during the day, we almost do not need any electrical energy to have good lighting in a building. So day lighting is also an important concept for saving energy and using the natural energy of the sun for our purpose. Another topic that we will like to talk about is electric power from the sun, because the most usable form of electrical power is the power is the electrical power. There are two routes going into for getting electrical power from the sun. One of the routes is that have concentration, which means increase solar energy which is incident on a lot of area, concentrate it on a very small area, heat fluids to a very large temperature, run a turbine so that you get mechanical energy which can be converted to electrical, as well as you get heat which can also be used as process heat for industry. The two things being called cogeneration. There are many stations which are operating in the world on this system, but somehow this thermal route has not yet been commercialized compared to another route that we will be talking about in the next meeting that we have, which is what we call the photovoltaic route, in which we get electrical energy directly from solar energy. So today what we have learnt? We have learnt that we can stay comfortable in the building by keeping the sun, by bringing the sun in, by keeping the sun out, by storing solar energy, by storing coolness, by using evaporative cooling, by using evaporative cooling for many purposes other than just cooling the water. And lastly, we learnt that a big storage of heat supplied to us by God is earth. The earth can be cooled, the earth can be heated, at least small areas of it relatively, by manipulation, and therefore we have this thing also under control. Thank you.